and welcome to New Foundation Unity. This is our third class in the series on relationships in the Bible. The streaming has been tested tonight, so it should be working, but in case yours isn't and you're having any difficulties, email mark@truthunity.net. I meant to put the phone number on the board if you choose to call in. I will also repeat it later, but it is 816-301-6304. And now, as we begin our time together, I invite you to find a comfortable place in your seat. Close your eyes. Become still. And as you turn within, release all outer concerns and settle in to that easy chair of your own being in the silence. It is here in the silence that we recognize the truth of our being. One power, one presence, one life, one mind, and we are one with that one. And in that awareness we do give thanks in the name and through the power of our master teacher, our way shower, Jesus Christ. Amen. Tonight we're going to talk about brothers. The question, and we're going to start with the original brothers, the first brothers that appear in Genesis, Cain and Abel. And this is an allegory, but don't let that detract from the spiritual truth that is here. The question behind the allegory is, if in fact we are all one, we are all from the same source, two brothers, same father and mother, yes, and God said that everything was good, then why is it that there is disharmony, discord in family or tribal relationships? Oh, that was okay. Go ahead.
I have even a more basic question, and it might tie in. And
Okay.
I didn't ask it because I didn't think it might tie in, but now that you said that, is that what do you think the undertone of, for instance, what we feel when we hear the word "cursed is the ground," "cursed is you on your belly," pain? What do you think those kinds of, how do you think those kinds of feelings serve the metaphysical sense that we're supposed to bring from that?
That's a big question. I will address that. But let's talk about the brothers first, because remember that Adam and Eve, when they got kicked out of the garden, then they became physical beings. And all of those curses are exactly what happens when we become physical beings. There is nothing there that we have not experienced. It's not because of any disobedience. Remember, you can't be disobedient if you don't have free will, and you don't have free will until you are physical. And so the curses, do snakes crawl on the ground? Yes. Do women have pain in childbirth? Yes. Do men have to till the ground and go to work? Absolutely. Is that a curse? Well, it comes as the price of separation from the one source. And our work tonight, and we'll see this with the brothers, is to come back to where we started, only with a conscious awareness of that oneness. And this is true of all the relationships we are going to look at. And see, we are a trinity. We are spirit expressing through a soul, thinking and feeling, that manifests in a body. Okay, so here we are, and you have this diagram, we are spirit. We express through a soul in a human body. Now, Adam and Eve, when they leave the garden, they become two. Adam and Eve representing the soul. Eve, the feeling, the intuitive nature. Adam, the thinking or the intellect. And so all the inner work takes place within the soul or within consciousness, and we go through all these experiences in life. Do we not have experiences in which we are moving closer and closer to making that connection again with the source? There are spiritual practices, of course, to speed up the process. And so here we have brothers. Brothers are, of course, closely related in consciousness. And we're going to see what went wrong here, because if we are divine in our origin, then we went wrong somehow in the way we treat one another. Right? Okay. So, once Adam and Eve, as God, Spirit, there's only one. But in order to express, that is, to fulfill God's desire to express in us, there has to be two, thinking and feeling. This is how we multiply and be fruitful. That's not only true on a physical level, it's true on a metaphysical level. You can have hundreds and hundreds of thoughts, but without any feeling, which is the fuel, those thoughts don't manifest. Okay, so thinking and feeling. And this question you can answer, because I know you know the answer, and that is, when do we see the thinking and feeling become one in a harmonious marriage? Okay? Wedding at Cana. All right? That's in the New Testament. That's the first sign that Jesus gave. That when the thinking and feeling, or the intuition and the intellect, or the subconscious and the conscious become one, that then opens the way for the Christ. Okay. So here we have these brothers. Now, remember, the soul has eaten of the fruit. So they see good and evil. When we start out in life, are we not aware of ourselves first as physical? And then at a certain point, we begin to recognize that we can think and we have thoughts. And the very last thing is to become awakened to our spiritual nature. But that is the journey that we go through. And we learn lessons as we go along through these experiences. And as I was telling you the other day, it's a very fun exercise to look back over the events of your life and say, this was a crossroads. This is when things were transformed for me. I had this new insight, and then this, and then this, and this is how I got to, in consciousness, where I am right now. Okay. So we grow through these experiences in order to come back to know our oneness. We knew it in the beginning, and we're going to know it at the end of the journey, and we haven't moved anywhere except our perception has shifted. So it's a pathless path, if you will, a pathless path. Because you go from here to here through there, which is also here. Okay. I was looking again for T.S. Eliot, because that's one of my favorite passages, where he says, "We shall not cease from exploration until we return to where we started, knowing it for the first time." Okay. That's from the 4 Quartets. Okay, so I always suggest to you that you look at the meaning of the names of the two. So here we have Cain and we have Abel. And as you will see, as we go through different sets of brothers, one brother stays home, other brother wanders. Okay? And although this doesn't happen with Cain and Abel, the other sets of brothers we're going to talk about get reconciled. So when we have two brothers, we have the conscious thought and the subconscious thought. All right. Cain is a tiller of the soil. That's the occupation of his father. Whereas Abel is the keeper of the sheep. Okay, that's closer to the mental realm, and Cain is closer to the physical. Now think of this, that a tiller of the ground, acquisitive, his name means acquisitive. It's that part of us that wants to acquire and to possess. And remember that Cain derives no strength from the ground. All right. If we identify totally with our physical life, we will deplete ourselves, and we will, in essence, kill off that part of us that is aspiring to be spiritual. Make sense? Charles Fillmore said the secret of Jesus was his identification with God. I and the Father are one. But in the case of Cain, as is the case with Esau later, he identifies with the earth, the earthy, the physical. And if you look around the world, around the city, you're going to find people at different levels of understanding of their relationship to God. The big revolution came with Jesus, who discovered the kingdom of God is within us. Huge, big shift. It is so different from seeing a God that's way, way, way far away from us, that rewards and punishes, to feeling the nearness and the intimacy of God within us, guiding us like the Good Shepherd, and providing us with every need. So that is a big shift, but we have to go through many steps along the way until we get to that realization for ourselves. Nobody can do that for us. The story, by the way, is in Genesis chapter 4, 1 through 24. Here's what Charles Fillmore has to say about brotherhood. We talk about brotherhood a lot, right? In the peace song, let me walk with my brother. God as our Father, let me walk with my brother. All right, if we're from the same source, we ought to be harmonious, the subconscious and the conscious of the thinking aspect. And here's what Charles Fillmore has to say, that brotherhood is an established thought, a divine idea in high spiritual consciousness that springs from an understanding that God is the one Father and all men are brothers. Now, we may say, yes, I believe that, but in our relationships, maybe we're not quite up to that knowing. Yeah, okay. Now, here's what went wrong. They made a sacrifice. Cain and Abel, his brother, they both made a sacrifice to God. Now, Jesus also made, and we make, as a result of the teachings of Jesus, we also make a sacrifice to get closer to God. The way they did it in biblical times was in an outer way. And they took their crops, or they took their oil, and they offered it, took their animals, and offered it upon the altar. And as it turned out, Cain offered the fruits of the ground, of the earth, and Abel offered a sheep, I think. So God does not favor animals over vegetables. God is no respecter of persons. But what happens is that the motive involved is what counts in terms of gaining favor. If you desire through your sacrifice to make a connection with God, that is always more favorable than just giving something out of a sense of obligation, for instance. Right? So motive, it's not what is offered as much as it is how it is offered. How do we sacrifice? How did Jesus tell us to sacrifice? He said, go into the inner chamber, close the door on the outside world, close the door on the world of the senses, pray, that is, make your connection in the silence. And your sacrifice is, you're sacrificing this outer world for a time in order to make that connection. Here is our diagram, which illustrates it so beautifully. This is the way someone like Cain, in an only human sort of consciousness, and here is the way Jesus taught us to do it. Here you go into the inner chamber and close the door. Here's the door closed. Pray to your Father in secret. When you close that door, the divine energy comes in here and goes down into the subconscious and purifies out anything that does not belong there. And then that divine idea comes up and becomes conscious. So you can say, I am a spiritual being. And consciously know that as you're interacting with a situation, no matter how challenging it is. But here, this would be someone in merely physical consciousness who takes an understanding of reality from the outside world. And even though this door is open, it is functionally closed because the awareness is all deriving information from the outside, which is not a good test of reality, and then it goes down into the subconscious and it stays there and continues to direct and to control the way we think and the way we act until we go into that inner chamber, close the door, and then the divine energy can flow through and purify. Okay. And when it's completely cleared out, then the thinking and the conscious and the subconscious become one, and that's when the superconscious, that is our awareness of the Christ, prevails in us under all circumstances. Okay, so here's Cain and Abel. And so in an only human state of consciousness, Cain, even though he's warned by God, he's angry and he's jealous of his brother. And that's all it took for him to go and kill his brother. Whenever we have an emotion that is motivated as a negative feeling, like jealousy, if we do something out of jealousy or out of revenge, that is not a motive that ever produces any good results.
Say that again now.
Okay.
Come back.
Cain is jealous of his brother. His brother got more favor from the Lord because what he offered was of a higher nature of himself. He's closer to the mental realm. He's kind of like vapor. That's what his name is. To me,
and I'm sorry to contradict this, because this is just conversation. It seems that, for instance, watch Cain go get a portion of his stuff, and then you watch Abel. He makes a distinction. He goes to the firstlings. He goes to the fat of the flock. You know, he's being very, very careful and excited about this thing that he's going to do as an offering to God. And so you could see, so to me, that's the contrast, is that Abel's doing more. It means more to him. He's more involved in it. He's distinguishing between what he keeps and what he gives. And Cain, it's just a very simple matter of fact that declared him sentence, and Cain brought an offering of the field.
Well, it is. That's what I mean by saying the motive is important.
Right.
If your motive is to get closer to God through your sacrifice, yes. If it's just out of obligation, if it's just out of this is something I have to do because the church says I do, then there's not an offering from your heart there. And so, yes, of course, one is closer to God when one offers the highest and the best that one can. The widow's mite, we talked about that. The widow's mite. And so, because Cain dominates, all the spiritual aspirations are killed. They are killed out. All right?
He's doing it in a sense of duty. And there's no
he's
enthusiasm
in his offering.
Right.
But he's angry and jealous because he wants the favor.
And he sees the action.
Okay, so then he takes action and he kills his brother. But for us, it's like spiritual aspirations get killed out of us when our jealousy or our negative feelings in the subconscious are dominant. Revenge. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. We're not supposed to take vengeance. We're supposed to be one with our brother.
And so the practice that is being, because this is so subtle. This is not. They don't spell everything out for you. But so Cain became jealous. God comes to Cain, and in the allegory, I'm just trying to flesh it out. God comes to Cain and says, "Look, this way that you're entertaining, that in here is called, in our translation, called sin. It's looking to dominate, and you need to dominate it, not let it dominate you." And so Cain does the opposite. Instead of going inside and mastering himself, he goes outside and kills Abel.
Okay.
See, and God was directing him inside, and he still didn't take the hint.
Okay. So now let's bring it down to where most people in the world are today. They let their need for safety, for security, for mere survival dominate their lives. And maybe it's by necessity. But that takes all the resources that the body has to just survive. Do you see how that works? It's not like Cain, what was immoral is that he acted on a negative emotion to get vengeance. He, like every one of us, are those who are only aware of themselves in the world as a physical being with thoughts, a body with thoughts, and unaware of the spirit. They do not realize that they have control over those emotions. So the emotions dominate, and that kills because it depletes our energy.
I think we need to be careful when saying negative emotions.
That is, emotions that do not bring us into a connected state. All right, any that do not serve. Okay, and if anyone out there is not understanding anything, you will have a chance to ask questions, and please do. Now, here's the wording. Here's what happened. He heard what God said, and his countenance fell. Okay. He wanted God's favor too, and he was rejected. All right. But we are aware of ourselves as physical beings first. Think back at a time when what you thought was most important, and maybe somebody tried to take your stuff from you, And so then it says sin is crouching at the door. Sin crouching, the ultimate sin is a sense of separation. You can never actually be separated from God, but in awareness, in mind, you can be separate to the point where you function as though you were separate. And so he kills Cain. And then, even though he's killed Cain, he knows he's done something wrong. And so he wanders. But this is the journey of us all. It's the same thing that happened to Moses, who killed an Egyptian. He had to flee. Cain kills his brother. He has to flee. And he is doomed to wander. We wander through all these experiences of our lives until we remember and wake up to the truth of our spiritual nature. It may not happen in one lifetime. Okay. And so, yeah.
And you think kill is just part of the allegory? It's anything that sends us any
emotion that causes us to allow that subconscious to dominate, to take over.
Yeah.
All right.
So we're not specifically, the murder isn't important. Just all the choices that were made to get into that wrong path, to be sent out.
But it's not a wrong path. It's an inevitable path.
Okay, but it's an inevitable. Just help us here, because sometimes, like for instance, the word sin, it just got out there, and then, but then other times, if we say another word, that no, that's not right. So, what is meant by what is sin here?
Sin is a sense.
It's not a legalistic thing.
A sense of separation. That's the only one sin, to block the path of the Holy Spirit to enter into you. One unforgivable sin, because only you can release that. So it's not a wrong path. We're all destined.
Well, it's definitely a lesser path. Because
but Chuck, how can you get to the point of awareness of your spiritual origin if you don't start out as a physical being?
No. I mean, Abel did it. Abel was a physical being.
No,
Abel made a great offering.
He went poof. He went poof. All right.
I mean, he's so able.
We have both Cain and Abel within us.
Right.
And there have been times in everyone's life, I'm sure, where the Cain has become dominant. Have you ever felt jealous? I have. Okay. If you've ever had a feeling of either superiority or inferiority, then something from the subconscious is dominating because you are God's beloved child. But it takes a lifetime of spiritual experiences to come to that conscious realization. So we have both of them within us. And so, yeah, there's two states of consciousness. Adam and Eve ate of the knowledge of good, the tree, the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. So we're born into a world of physicality where we see good and we see evil. And we have both Cain and Abel within us. And Dad says, where is Cain? Where is Abel? And he says, am I my brother's keeper? Are we?
Sure.
Yeah. Am I my brother's keeper? But that's a statement that says, I'm not responsible. If you don't know where Abel is, it's not my problem, right? Don't we make excuses for ourselves at times and saying, I have nothing to do with him. Hey, he's your brother. Okay. But no matter, and here's the practical lesson from this, that no matter to what depth you have gone, you can have murdered someone, you can have violated all of the commandments, and you still have that reminder, that mark of God on your forehead. So even though he had to wander, and he wandered away to the east of Eden, he got outside, separate, okay, a sense of separateness from God, but he had that mark on his forehead, and that was his protection. And then we talked about the lineage, and his first son was Enoch. Enoch was one of 3 who ascended in the Bible. Enoch walked with God. Enoch, Elijah, and Jesus. So it doesn't matter what you've done. It only matters that you have that awareness that you can come back and reconnect and have as many chances as you need in order to reconnect with God. So see, all these sets of brothers we're going to talk about, both of them exist within us. Now, in some cases, one is more predominant than the other. Hopefully the Cain in us comes up less often. Okay. And so I think that the practical lesson is there's no transgression that is so great that you can't regain an awareness of that divine spark, your divine origin, which should be a reason for hope, to just keep on moving forward. So then Cain goes off and he has his journey. Now, also involved in these early chapters, we have the law of compensation. All right. So Seth was compensation for Adam and Eve because they lost Abel. Okay. Because Adam and Eve suffered a loss being kicked out of the garden. Remember, there was a fall in vibration to become physical, and therefore they were compensated with a son, 2 sons actually. Okay, so we sometimes call it the law of karma. We'll see it very clearly in the next set of brothers that we're going to talk about. Namely, Jacob and Esau. Okay, Jacob means supplanter, and Esau means rough, ruddy, earthy, hairy. So you get the picture that Esau is the physical one. And I think, too, this gives you a clearer picture of Cain, because it's a step above, but it's just a little clearer. So Esau represents the physical, who sells his birthright for a bowl of lentils. All right, how many times have we, or do we know people who have sold their birthright, divine substance, have depleted their for some perceived physical gain, in security, in safety, something physical that we think is our source of life. Okay. So this is always going on. So here's the big deal about the birthright. Now, Esau was born first, and there is an allegory that says that even in the womb, Jacob and Esau were wrestling with one another, and the reason he was grabbing on to his brother's heel was that he wanted to keep him from coming out first. So in a physical sense, the birthright meant land, it meant power, it meant inheriting by a factor of 2 to 1 the assets of your father. But Jacob had a sense of the spiritual value of the birthright, which was the covenant of Abraham. Okay, that covenant was repeated to, first it was to Abraham, then it was to Jacob, as you will see, and then it went to, it was with Isaac too, and with Jacob and everybody. And so, and you find the story of Jacob and Esau, that the birth is in chapter 25, and then it goes all the way to their reconciliation in chapter 33. Well, Esau realizes he's been cheated, vows vengeance. Does this sound like Cain? Sounds a little bit like Cain. And Jacob has to flee. Now, with the help of his mother, he goes to Haran, a higher place in consciousness, but he's on a journey. He represents the mental. The mental supplants the physical, supplanter. Okay. And he gets to a very famous passage called Jacob's Ladder. So he's not feeling real secure right now, because he realizes that he was a deceiver, he was a trickster, and that Esau's going to come after him. And so he lies down to sleep on a stone. All right? He lies down on a stone. So he's resting on a stone. Sometimes means truth. It sometimes means, because he's lying down, his present level of understanding. But he has a dream, and he dreams of the ladder, and the ladder is what makes the connection between God, the angels descending up and down the ladder. And that's our connection to God. It's like a ladder, and the rungs of the ladder are like degrees of awareness of that connection. And at the end of the dream, when he wakes up in the morning, he has the revelation. God was in this place, and I did not know it. Okay, God is present. You're not always aware of it, but God is always present in every situation, in every relationship. So that ladder, isn't it? Now the sin
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Because supplanter, not so much maybe that the negative side, but in the fact that Jacob is the kind of person that's going to overcome even the most inherent of obstacles. Because he saw in his life, the only thing his life was lacking was the birthright. And all he had to do was secure that from Esau. And he was able to do that. And so and so he supplants, but it's not necessarily an evil thing. It's just something that he's able to do in his need.
Okay.
To get to his highest place.
Yes, he has an awareness of the value of the birthright. But don't we sometimes try to force our good before it's timely? He's going to get the birthright. Do you think God cares about money and land and power? No. The spiritual birthright is the covenant. I will always be with you. All this land that you can see is yours. You will be blessed, and you will have generations. That's the spiritual birthright. He has an inkling of that, but he forces his good, and he uses the wrong means. He's functioning on the principle that the end justifies the means, and you see this has consequences because he in turn gets tricked.
Okay, so here, let me. I'm sorry, I got to ask this question. And so reflect those principles back all the way to Genesis 3. There was always going to be a way, but it didn't necessarily have to be the way that this story plays out, because there was always going to be a way, right? It didn't.
Yes.
It could have been another agent other than the serpent. It could have been another. Things could have always worked out, right? And so there was more than one way for this thing to happen. This is just the way that it happened.
This was God's plan. Okay?
You think?
It was God's plan. Let us make man in our image and likeness.
I get that.
Okay.
Piece.
Prepared the environment, put the snake there. Okay.
That doesn't matter. But that's anyway.
Anyway, the name change is important. Whenever you see a name change, that's like an exclamation point. The place where he was in consciousness, it was called Luz, which means separation. And he changed the name to Bethel, all right, house of God. And he made an altar there. He took that stone that he had slept on, put it on, made an altar out of it, and put oil on it. So he, in essence, anointed. Oil represents love. Okay, so he lifted that understanding that previously had been one of separation to one of God is present, and I knew it not. But now I do. Now look what happens. So he goes on to Haran, and he in turn is tricked. If you recall, he sees Rachel. He falls in love with Rachel. And if you wanted to marry someone in those days, you had to pay a price. Okay, it's called a dowry. And he worked 7 years for Rachel. And just as he had tricked his brother Esau with the help of his mother, so now Leah, with the help of her father, tricks Jacob, and he ends up marrying the oldest daughter instead of the daughter that he loved. But what does he do? He moves right on. He says, I'm keeping on, because and he worked another 7 years, all right, to get Rachel. Leah was the despised one. She was compensated. She had 6 sons and 1 daughter. And Rachel, eventually, after she took the mandrake, she convinced her what would that be, her sister-in-law, I guess, was Leah? No, her sister. Her sister, to sell her the mandrake, which was like a fertility plant. And so she has children of her own, Joseph and Benjamin, those two. And even those 2 brothers, one stays at home, one wanders. You remember what happened to Joseph? Yeah. He went all the way to Egypt. But he rose to the top, and that famous line of, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." It's like a forgiveness story of how these brothers had treated him so badly, and he was able to forgive them in the end. Not only that, but to save them.
But there's even a longer part of the story where he's kind of messing with them too.
Oh yeah, he does.
And that takes up a lot of time.
Yeah, he is messing with them, but it really has to do. I think he has a little credit coming to him on that score, but he wants them to go get Benjamin. You see, the faculty of imagination, which Joseph represents, can't function without the faith. And so
imagination and faith, you say?
Yeah. They need to be together, first in mind, then in manifestation. So,
but isn't it ironic that Jacob got his birthright with a little bit of a scheme, and Leah got her birthright?
That's right.
A little bit of a scheme. He wasn't wrong. It was almost kind of karma.
Exactly. That's why it's called the law of compensation. Okay, rather than karma. Karma's used in bad situations.
Yeah, and
okay.
I don't understand that at all.
Yeah. And so here we have these sets of brothers. Then again, he tricks Laban, but this time he tricks him in a way that doesn't cause any harm. Finally, he decides he's going to go return, because now he's had the promise that he's going to return to his homeland, and he's got all these cattle, and he's got wives and kids and all this. And so he makes a deal. Laban doesn't want him to go, because he's made Laban very rich these 14 years that he's been there. And so Laban says, okay, we'll make a deal, and I'm going to take all the spotted and black cattle out of the herd, and you can have whatever is left. And so Jacob uses his, and here again is the imagination, faith and imagination, and he puts speckled, he goes to the water trough where the cattle go, and he puts branches that are spotted because they have pieces out of them, and so the cattle come and they look at these branches, and they all turn out and reproduce speckled. I mean, it's
He's like that.
It's
He's like
the-
that monk that discovered that there were dominant and recessive genes. You know, he knew how things happened. You know, and because what these stories tell you,
it's how your mind works. That where you put your attention grows stronger in your experience.
So you're going to call it attention rather than just being smarter than your opponent?
Well, he was smarter, but here again, he's a trickster. Okay.
Well,
Now,
just because you use
Okay.
your strengths doesn't make you.
all right, but he has not yet reconciled with his brother. So he starts home. He hears that Esau is coming with a full army in his direction.
400 men.
400 men. And he's kind of scared. And so here is the second important vision that he has. And this is at Jabbok Ford, where he wrestles with the angel all night. You know, he's trying to marshal some courage and some hope and, you know, that everything's going to turn out well. And so he wrestles with the angel. His angel is his own conscience. He still has a bit of a guilty conscience for having deceived his brother. And now he feels like his brother's going to come back and get him. And so the wrestling with the angel goes on all night. He ends up with a wound on his thigh. And so there again, a bit of his personality, if you will, a piece of his pride or a piece of his humanness is wounded. And it's a beautiful reconciliation.
You know what this
That's
sounds
when
like?
he gets a name change. That was my point in telling that part of it. Then he becomes Israel. Then that is an aspirant to spiritual values. Okay, let's see. We're almost to the halfway point. And I want to mention one more set of brothers, because this is in the New Testament, and this is in Luke 15, verses 11 through 32. And this is the prodigal son. No name here. We don't know what the prodigal was called because it's an aspect of consciousness. There was a man who had 2 sons. Okay, here again, we have the 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, it's always the younger one, right? Father, give me the share of property that falls to me. Now, that meant that he would get 1/3 instead of 2/3. All right, it's premature. He's the younger one. The older one gets 2/3. The older one gets 2/3. And so then what does he do? And he divided his living between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took his journey into a far country. All right, he went way out into this sense of separation. He was way out into the physical. And there he squandered his property in loose living. Everyone that I know practically is a very poor steward of their divine energy. They squander their time, they squander their energy in false teachings, in whatever.
Every variety of ways.
Every variety of ways. That's what
Did you say everyone?
Well, practically. hopefully, once you've discovered your connection, hopefully. But we have a prodigal in us that from time to time we forget the connection and we go off into the far country, all right, metaphysically speaking.
I think, and maybe that speaks to an instinct of, for instance, way back in Genesis 1, he says, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and rule over. And that word for rule there in the Hebrew is the kind of like, treading, I mean, you really get to know it. Your feet get on top of it. You really get to know it. And so maybe the instinct to do that, to explore, to go out and have a discovery, to go out and find it for yourself is part and parcel with who we are.
It's inborn. Why? Yes. Because it's God's desire to fulfill in us and through us.
So our desire to discover and our curiosity is the image reflections of God's desire to express through.
God can't act directly on human affairs. Yeah. God has to work through us. Okay, and the prodigal hits rock bottom, and this is often the case. He finds himself eating the pig's food. And many people have, a dark night, if you will, a low point. I once asked someone if everyone had a rock bottom, and he said, unfortunately, no. But he did. He was a good Jewish boy, and that was a very bad thing to be doing, was eating pig food. So, and when he had spent everything, he'd given, all of his energy invested in a very poor return. And he began to be in want. All right, we're depleted when we squander our energy in, drunkenness or whatever. So he went and joined himself to one of the citizens of the country who sent him into the fields to feed swine. Ooh. And he would gladly have fed on the pods that the swine ate. Not even the essence of the pod, but the pods. And no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, all right, and it happens to all of us, there comes a point when we say, I don't have to live like this. I know there is a better way. And that's God tapping on the door of your heart, saying, yes, let me come in. That is God's desire, tapping on the door of your heart. Okay? Desire from the Father.
So a good, wise friend, seeing you at the end of yourself, might say, you know what? I'm tempted to feel sorry for you, but I know that what I should do is ask you, what do you think somebody's trying to tell you? Right? Right?
Depends on how good a friend you want. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, but I perish here with hunger? So the one who stayed home, remember, even the servants are doing better than he is. I will arise, I will go up in consciousness and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I've squandered my inheritance. I've gone into a state of separation and forgotten about your presence.
Are you reading the RSV?
Oh, I was editorializing. Yes.
Okay.
I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. Okay, so he is humbled. And he arose and came to his father. But while he was yet at a distance, his father saw him and had compassion. This is God's forgiving love. And ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Bring quickly the best robe. Robe is what we clothe our, all right? This is the etheric field, our aura, our energy field. The best robe, and put it on him, and put a ring on his finger. Okay, the ring, a symbol of authority.
On the signet.
The signet, absolutely. Yeah. And shoes on his feet, new understanding. And bring the fatted calf. Hey, we're going to have a party. And kill it, and let us eat and make merry. For this my son was dead. Okay, Cain, remember, killed Abel, dead. The prodigal was dead to his spiritual origin and is alive again. He was lost and is found, and they began to make merry. Now, look at his brother. His brother is jealous. Here we go. You know, the brother who stayed home. He didn't make the journey. He stayed home. And this is like the person who does, you know, dots their I's and crosses their T's and goes to church on Sunday and, you know, says their prayers.
But never entertains any thought of taking a risk.
Exactly.
Some sort of consciousness.
Right. Now the elder son, who was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what this meant. And he said to him, Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has received him safe and sound. But he was angry and refused to go in. Okay, self-righteous. You know, how come he gets that and I don't? His father came out and entreated him, but he answered his father, Lo, these many years I have served you. I've been so righteous, right? And I never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a kid that I might make merry with my friends. But when the son of yours came, who has devoured your living with harlots, you killed for him the fatted calf. And he said to him, Son, you are always with me. And this is for all of us. And all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to make merry and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive, was lost, and now is found. We've all been lost. And we all have a chance to regain our connection. If anyone would like to call in, ask a question about any of these sets of brothers, 816-301-6304. And I'll keep talking.
I have a technical question.
Okay.
That's the reason why I asked if you were in RSV.
Yeah.
Because in Luke chapter 15,
so in the RSV, in Luke 15:18 and Luke 15:20.
So the RSV, does it actually say literally arose?
Yes.
Okay, because the NASB says get up, but I like arose.
Yeah.
I like arose better.
The NRSV is not metaphysically as...
But that's a better interpretation than this is. For metaphysics. That one.
Okay. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Eleanor. Great.
Bob, you there?
Yeah.
Oh.
I had to turn off my computer.
Oh, okay.
Feedback. Chuck's still talking. Very, 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 very interesting conversation. A key point, I think, in it, in what Chuck said about the curiosity, what I see here from the very beginning with Adam and Eve in the garden, and Cain and Abel and Jacob and the prodigal son is, and I think Chuck nailed it on the head, is there is something in us to wander away from what is. And we can only discover and find the thing of value, the divine, the gold, by leaving. And
yes, absolutely.
And we see the whole pattern. When you were talking about him wrestling with an angel, in one sense, because George Lamsa says, the Aramaic scripture scholar says that angel means God thoughts. And so he's, in a sense, wrestling with a divine idea that's trying to get through to his blockages that he has there, his fear of being harmed or his brother getting even with him.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. He's afraid because he hasn't completely cleared his conscience of wrongdoing. Right. He is afraid because his brother is coming with a huge army.
You know, it's interesting that Bob brings up angel as God thought, because as you were talking about this, I was thinking, it's this experience sounds like what some of the more conservative, radical, Protestant, small religious groups talk when they talk about somebody praying through on an issue. It's like he wrestled with these God thoughts and he prayed through. And so he had an assurance, right, that his prayer was heard, was going to be answered, and a little bit of the cost was put something of yourself aside. The wound of
he was wounded.
Aside.
Yeah.
You have to put yourself aside, and we'll make this work out. And he prayed through, and that's how it happened for him.
He did, and a glorious reconciliation. Yeah. Well, there does seem to be that continual theme of wandering away and coming back home. And
Bob would be interested in this too.
In the story of Adam and Eve, I mean, we have the serpent, but Eve's curious. What is this?
Yes, sure.
You said in one of your classes one time is that they weren't kicked out of the garden. They had to leave the garden in order to see the beauty within themselves, which was one with God.
Absolutely.
And they weren't able to see. I remember the point you made is that they were not mature. They were more like a child and cannot comprehend what's the word I'm looking for? The mightiness of the truth of who we are.
Well, that's right, and that they actually had to leave the garden because you can't evolve. You can't evolve until you have a soul and a human nervous system to work through, and and it's commonly believed that Adam and Eve were disobedient, but they weren't disobedient. They couldn't be disobedient because they had no free will when they were in the garden. They weren't yet fully born into physicality.
Well, you can kind of see that in the story of this prodigal.
What Chuck just said, that I think I heard him right, that we have in the right-wing thinking theologians today is based on fear, sort of like the prodigal son that stayed home. They get it on a superficial, intellectual level, but it takes an element of boldness and courage and guts to move into that unknown of the mystical level.
And find the existential. Because that prodigal son, when he gets home, he is having so much fun, and his brother at home has no idea of how to have fun being at home, has no value for it, can't enjoy it. So he's there all the time, he's not having any fun, and the prodigal son comes home, and there's nothing but fun at home.
Celebration, it's like when you're aware that your divine nature is what we have that saves us and provides for us. It's definitely a cause for celebration.
And thinking, one would say, and I've been told, you have to be careful. You think you're God, you're not. And so they really don't look at that Genesis, first chapter of Genesis, and the second chapter as you are made in the image and likeness of God. You are God's like. You are the offspring. You're the chip off the old block. They can't see that, and so they stay like the son that stayed home in that limited thinking consciousness and judge, condemn, and but they think they have it. I don't know. It's been going on from the beginning of time. So
True.
What that just reminded me of. Remember the parable where the master gives these three servants. He gives one piece of stuff, and gives another two pieces, another five. And the son that stayed at home is like the person that got the one thing that buried it.
Yeah,
so
right.
he would lose it, right? And
Right.
didn't get any gain.
Yeah.
Didn't take any risk. Didn't get any gain. Didn't do anything.
Yeah.
There's a parallel there, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that there's, once you understand, even on the intellectual level of the teachings of Jesus, that the presence of God is within you, the kingdom of God is within you. You can't pretend after that you don't know. And so if you stay at home, so to speak, and don't explore that spiritual nature, I think you get stuck in in the only human consciousness.
Yeah, because if you've ever really experienced God, then it's fun, it's joy, it's bliss. And if it doesn't have that, it's not God.
Well,
I think.
okay.
It's beautiful, it's good, all those things that God says His creation is.
Yeah, that's true.
One of the keys.
Yeah.
One of the keys to all this, and I think, and this is where Jesus says it so often, and I could come into this knowing, and I can experience this God, but the key to growing in that wisdom and that wisdom of that inner knowing is humility.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, like the prodigal.
The Cain in me wants to say, what a grand boy am I. Look at me, I'm better than you because I have a deeper awareness. You know what I'm saying? So we can utilize this gift of knowing. The ego can sabotage it and
Absolutely.
and manipulate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's where the self-righteousness comes in, spiritual pride.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I don't know if everybody who is watching this broadcast is aware of the study questions. So if you've asked me for those and you don't have them, email me. But for next week, because we're going to talk about sisters, if you do not have this picture, then ask me for that as well. This is a picture of Jesus, Lazarus, Martha, and Mary. And for those of you who are interested in demonstrating your metaphysical and spiritual understanding, I will ask you to do an interpretation of this. because the subtitle of the title page, it's called Relationships in the Bible, a scientific means of self-exploration. And so there are colors, and there are positions. And so I'll just ask everyone to put what you know about brothers, what you know about the Christ, put it all together and see what you come up with. Okay, so that's Jesus, Lazarus, Martha, and Mary. Remember that women represent, sisters represent two aspects of our feeling nature, and men represent two aspects of our thinking nature. And that consciousness, thinking, and feeling have to be married. That is, they have to be harmoniously related and in the right relationship to open the way for the Christ to come through.
Say that again now. What did you just say?
Okay.
That last statement.
In order for the Christ to come through, we have to join our thinking and feeling, conscious, subconscious, all right, thinking, feeling, intellect, intuition. They have to be joined harmoniously and in the right relationship in order to clear the way for the Christ to come through. We're already whole. There's nothing we can do more except to release and to clear and to, we have to weed the garden, to realize that it's abundantly fruitful.
I want to get to where the prodigal son is. He's come home and he's partying.
Well, yeah, but look what he has. He has a new consciousness.
Right.
He has
Value. He understands.
He has more authority, and he has a new understanding, of course, and that goes with the territory. But you have to do the work. You have to arise and come home.
And you have to go out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. One question about
it was when he was in the midst of eating with the pigs.
Eating with the pigs, yeah.
That the thinking and feeling nature harmonized and came together, and the Christ within him, that inner wisdom within him, guided him where to go.
I think, when you get to the point where you see, I am really stuck here, and you sort of let go, and then in that moment of letting go, that revelation pops into your head and say, oh my God, I don't have to live like this. Yeah, it's such an interesting story. And I think too of Myrtle, that she was resigned when she went into that lecture. She was resigned that the doctors had said 3 months to live or whatever, and it's an incurable disease, and she'd inherited it from her family, and she comes out. That's pretty rock bottom, I think. Mm-hmm. You've gotten as far humanly as you can possibly go, and you say, wouldn't hurt to go to this lecture. I'm not really interested, but hey, and got the truth that penetrated her soul so deeply that she never turned back. And she had that, she was never sick again. She never wavered. It was like, it was permanent when it happened to her.
It's interesting because as you're talking about that experience with Myrtle, and she had a shift of consciousness, there really, in a sense, and using what you've been telling us, there could have been a name change for Myrtle.
Interesting, because Myrtle was not her given name. It was like she changed it. It was changed even before. Yeah, from Mary Carolyn to Myrtle.
Really?
Yeah. It was a name change that originated, at least by one account, it originated when she was little, and her father would swinging her around, playing with her, and he called her his little Merrily, and she translated that into Myrtle. But the amazing thing is that the oil of the myrtle tree is what heals tuberculosis.
Really?
And I thought, that just blows me away whenever I, that was a great aha when I was studying essential oils.
Wow.
Can I ask a question about
That is amazing.
in the Jacob story?
Yeah.
Did you talk about some thought about, Rebecca, it was really Rebecca's scheme before it was Jacob's scheme.
Yeah.
And so, what is that?
No.
What is Rebecca's action there telling us in the story?
Rebecca is the feeling nature, and she knows. Do you want to answer that? Yeah, go ahead.
Laban is
a brother.
the thinking nature and control.
Yeah,
Control the situation.
Yeah. Well, Rebecca, Isaac's wife, is the sister of Laban. So, Uncle Laban. So they're connected as brother and sister. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so brother and sister are on the same, that's part of the same consciousness. Always the relationships are in their origin oneness with God. In the days of biblical times, it was believed that human beings, you needed not only a mother and a father, but also God. You had to have the Trinity. You had to have Spirit to create the soul that then manifested in a body. So if you want to know what your consciousness is in a physical way, you look at your body. Okay. Anyway, so Rebecca, she helps him. She's the one who says, go to Haran, go see Uncle Laban, and he will help you.
What do you think the purpose of the concubines are in the story? What do they represent? Bilhah, Zilpah, Hagar.
They're handmaidens. They're like servants. Yeah.
No, they're having children that are in the lineage.
Yeah.
More than that.
Well, that'll be your assignment for next week. I have a whole lesson on.
Can you help me, Bob?
He wants to know about concubines, but again, they're they are used as servants are used, and they serve that aspect of the subconscious that needs to produce something. And if the subconscious, which is the feeling nature, isn't lively and active, okay, it can't produce. In Leah's case, it could, because she was being compensated for being hated. Anyway, I'll do more on that, but that's my first thought. So, Bob, if you have any thoughts on that, I'm open.
You know a concubine, you might ask her.
Say again.
One final note, and I had this in my notes for the question of law of compensation. Mm-hmm. You can say that's what goes around comes around.
Yes, and as you sow, so shall you reap.
Right.
And
what
then,
you sow, you shall reap.
And
yeah.
so once you become aware of that law, then you can't pretend that you're not aware of it. It's like if you're ignorant of the law, you're forgiven sometimes. But if you're a lawyer and you break the law, or if you're a judge and you break the law, you knew better. So
I think the Levitical law doesn't go as far as you just went, because there was a sacrifice for unintentional sin. So we have to recognize the consequences of what we do, whether it's intended or not.
Well,
according to the Levitical law, it points to that kind of.
We're going to go beyond the Levitical law, because the law that Jesus taught us was love God, love your neighbor as yourself, love one another as I have loved you, love your enemy, love life. We're all one. And you and the rock outside and the cockroach, and we all come from the same source.
And I understand that love covers a multitude of sins, so to speak, but all of these experiences in the evolution of consciousness are an essential part of that.
It's not a multitude of sins. It's that love metaphysically means knowing your oneness with. It's not love, affection. It's knowing your connection. And if you know your connection, you're not separate. And that Myrtle discovered this. She saw a worm crawling on the ground, all right, and said, that worm has intelligence. I have intelligence. We are from the same source. We have different expressions. But, if you knew your connection with the source, you could not be cruel to animals. You could not pollute your rivers. You could not have prejudice against any groups. I mean, it's when you spell out what it really means to know your oneness. It means that the person you like least in this whole world, you have to know your oneness with that person. You have to love them. You don't have to like them, but love, it's a, because the faculty of love is very indiscriminate. It needs judgment to balance it out so that it becomes wisdom. But, we love everything. We throw that word around, but love in its spiritual sense means to know your oneness. Anyway, are you still there? Are you still there?
I'm still there. I know we're over time, but the thought comes to me. This came up in my class the other night. We need to love our brothers, ISIS, because we need to see beyond who they are in their anger. When we talked about anger tonight, and they're blocking the blockages they've made of their true self and their divinity, but we really need to love them and pray for them more than we need to pray for anyone else.
That's true, and that's something that when you're actually confronted with that, and you think about praying for one of these politicians, or or somebody that has really done something quite horrible, it's hard. I know what you're saying, and we do. They're the ones that need the prayer to shift that.
And we need to see them. We need to see the Christ in them, and look beyond appearances. And it gets back to, you and I have talked about this pointing finger. What fault we see in another must be somewhere in ourselves, so we would not be able to recognize it. And that's what Jesus at the well said, that he was without sin or fault cast the first stone, and all of them left.
That's right. The woman in adultery. Yeah, right. Right. Yeah. Yes.
Could go on forever.
I know. I love it. Yeah, Chuck could go on forever too. I can go on forever. We can all go on forever. But thanks so much. I appreciate your calling in. It's a good discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for a good class. Thank you.
See you, Bob.
Good night. And for those of you who are still online, thank you for watching. And if you are interested in the study questions or need a picture of the title page, let me know and email me. So I thank you, God bless you, and have a good evening.